The galaxy burns. The heretic falls. And the Emperor protects. Welcome, Imperial citizens, to The Emperor Protects. My name is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and with me is my co-host Dan with Cubic Shenanigans. How you doing, man?
Great, man. Happy New Year, dude.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well. Are you doing any painting challenges this year for Horus Heresy, or you just gotta focus on other games?
Yeah, mostly it's all your fault. I've gotten into Conquest, and I'm going to be painting up Spire's army for that. So that's really my focus. I'm enjoying reading a lot of the Heresy tabletop books that our friend Dave has lent me. As I finish one, he's always got another one because he's got a stack of them.
So, like the big campaign books?
Yeah, the big tabletop ones, yeah. And
awesome.
coffee table books. So they're really fun to read.
Yeah, those old original Horus Heresy red books, you could beat a man to death with them. They were the heaviest things. It was insanity.
That is great.
Well, today in this episode, we're going to be covering the book. It's the Magnus the Red Primarch book. So we've just learned that 17 of the 18 Primarchs got their own special books, except for Horus. But then we decided he got the whole heresy named after him, so maybe that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so today we are going to be talking about Magnus the Red's story here, and I'm very excited to get into this one because the Master of Prospero it was a compelling read. I was in it from the first minute to the last, and it kept me wondering and on my feet, and it's just a really awesome picture. So, Dan, do you have any thoughts before we jump into talking about Magnus and his 1,000 sons?
No, other than it to me, we talked before the show, these books are a little bittersweet because, for example, we're going to talk about in this story how Magnus and one of his brothers, you really get a great feel of how close they are. Their friendship is so strong. And then you realize what the heresy did to that friendship. And you're like, oh God, that stinks.
Yep.
Yeah. And so as you're reading more and more, you know what's going to happen, and you're rooting for these guys, but it's like, it's crazy. But it is, as you said, a very compelling listen. There's so many, undercurrents going on and things that have been happening, and kind of all of a sudden your eyes just go, whoa. When things happen at some point. So
absolutely. And this is I got the full name, Magnus the Red, Master of Prospero by Graham McNeill is today's book.
Yes.
So wanted to make sure I got that whole thing out there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's jump into our plot summary here. It actually uses the exact same plot device that Lehman Russ had in his book, which is the story starts with someone about to start a story.
Yeah. So as you say, this is Magnus, before his fall, and it kind of starts with, sometime, whenever the time is, we don't know what it is. Magnus walks is how it starts, and so it says that he's surrounded by the ruins of the city of Tizca, and we know Tizca because it is the capital city of Prospero, which was destroyed, just decimated by the Space Wolves when they attacked the 1,000 Sons. And he's reminiscing, he's imagining it the way it once was, with its great pyramids filled with just, untold numbers of volumes of books and tomes and artifacts. And one of the things that really saddens him is these things have been passed down for thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. He mentions, a writer from Terra who is Shakespeare. And you're going, oh my gosh, Magnus read Shakespeare. It kind of puts it in perspective of how long these things had been there. Mm-hmm. And he's thinking about all the people who just, thirsted for knowledge. They loved to debate whatever it was they did that. But he knows that's a very long time ago based on where he is right now. So he just stands in its ruins. And this is where we get the first reference to the planet of the sorcerers, which we know is Prospero, which has been teleported into the warp. Yep. This is where the new and improved, quote, 1,000 Sons have their home. And then there's the ghost of an Astartes that kind of shows up, and his name is Athava. You're going to find out about him. Mm-hmm. And they kind of talk to each other, and then Athava keeps challenging Magnus, because Magnus said, well, this happened, and Athava goes, I know everything that you know. Are you sure that's what you want to say, or are you sure that's what really happened?
Final answer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really kind of stunning to see one of his former Thousand Sons, because it's just a ghost talking to him, but it's just a very, very dark time for Magnus. You can just tell by this preamble, as it were. And then, boom, warp shift. So now we go back to the 55th year of the Crusade.
Yep.
This is before the events of Isfahan 3. And they're on the planet of Morningstar. So that's the framework, the planet of Morningstar, for all of this. And we find the Thousand Sons excavating in a city it's a ruined city called Zakuran. And Athava, who we just mentioned, is alive and well with other Thousand Sons. And they found they just have like buckets and wheelbarrows and, carts full of books and artifacts and stuff that they dug up. And of course, this is what they do. Doesn't matter. They're going to look for things because they're Thousand Sons. But the problem is the planet they're on is being ravaged by magnetic storms. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of comes to one of these person called a conservator, and these conservators are kind of like they're kind of like scribes, I guess, for and advisors for the Thousand Sons. They're humans, and the one we meet first is called Nico Ashkali, is her name, and she says to Athava, there's a storm that's coming a lot faster than the weather people say it's going to arrive. That happens now too, isn't it? Right?
Yes,
exactly. It's going to be clear, and then we get 2 feet of snow. And if they stay there, they're not going to survive, because these magnetic storms that are happening literally just tear apart metallic objects, and they would tear apart their armor, and they would just destroy, just like they have this city and other things on the planet.
It fries radio waves and stuff like that too.
It's horrid. Yeah, horrid what happens. And but as she's telling him this, you also find out, and this is one of the first times I remember reading, other than Thousand Sons, about enumerations. And what Athava was doing was kind of meditating. And these enumerations, there are, I believe, 10 levels of these, that the Thousand Sons try to master each one of these levels, and each level gives them some skill or gives them some mastery. Mm-hmm. Based on what Magnus has taught these enumerations to them. And so they're designed to help the Psykers control their emotive states. Yes. And we know that the Thousand Sons have issues if they lose control. Mm-hmm. Things happen to them physically. And so this is Magnus's way of saying, hey, you're going to use this power, this incredible power that each one of you have, but this is a way for you to kind of stay in your lane.
Yeah, I kind of likened it to like emotionally bracing yourself for the next level of power you're going to unleash. Mm-hmm. So like healing requires one meditative preparation stance mentally, and then throwing a fireball at somebody is a much bigger tax of bringing in the warp, and so that requires a different kind of mental state and managing of emotions. So that's kind of what I thought it was, but yes. And they're gonna refer to it several times, and I think it's cool that they've mastered it to the point where they can just move between the levels. Yep.
The different enumerations. Oh, I need to go to 3rd level. Oh no, I need to go to 7th level. That does this. And it's just so cool to see them using these skills. So as they're embarking onto the ship, because they are packing up and getting ready to go, Ashkali asks Athava where his master is, where Magnus is, and he's not worried about it because it's Magnus. It doesn't matter. These storms can rip apart, cities, but his Primarch's going to be just fine.
He's fine.
No problem. Yep. So as they're all getting pretty, tense here, Magnus comes in. but the storm has arrived. And this, I'm not going to go into the details for this, but certainly if you have some input, there's just this great scene of these two other like civilian transports lifting off or trying to lift off. And then there's the Stormbird that the Marines are in. And it's just great them using it. At one time they reach out literally, and Thava has his fellow Marines, fellow Astartes grab this transport that's tumbling, and they stabilize it.
Yep.
And then when Stormbird takes off, it starts getting ripped apart, and they just throw up a kind shield around the whole thing. And you're going, Thousand Sons are so freaking cool, man.
Yeah, so they're working as squads and using their psychic power to like prevent catastrophe from happening, right? They're just doing cool stuff. Preventing crashes and making shields. I love it.
It's so cool.
There's no way this could go wrong.
You know,
who would argue with this?
This is one of those the Emperor is an idiot moments for me, because he really screwed up. Like, imagine the siege. If the Thousand Sons had been loyalists, you would have had an entire legion of Psykers who would have just like when the traitors tried to do stuff, a traitor Titan would come up and they would just like reach into the cockpit and crush the brains of the pilots, you know, and the power that they could have had available to them is just sad and tragic
no, he broke the rules.
rules, right. So anyway, we kind of shift now, and it talks a little bit more from a macro level that there's been a planet-wide state of emergency in effect for like 6 months.
Yep.
So these storms have been increasing in number, and they will literally just take thousands of kilometers of, of acreage and just destroy it. And just rip through cities, rip through whatever it is, and just devastate everything. And it seems like what's happening here is that the planet's magnetic field has been realigned very quickly. And even like on Earth, science here is our magnetic field is shifting very slowly.
Yep.
But it is shifting. But here it's happening at like a freakishly rapid rate.
Yeah, it's like the day after tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so in addition to the infrastructure, the atmosphere is being ripped off and stripped away because these storms are so powerful.
Yep. Your magnetosphere is gone.
Yep.
Open up to space radiation, stuff like that.
Yep. And then the planetary governor, he finally concedes that the planet's lost. He issues a planet-wide evacuation order. And so the capital city of Kalena is where like tens of thousands of refugees are coming here to try to get off the planet. And strangely enough, the Thousand Sons of Magnus received the governor's call for assistance. They just happened to be in the area. And they show up. Oh, and by the way, 2 months after Thousand Sons show up, the Iron Warriors show up too. So now we're going to get some Perturabo and Iron Warriors action, which is very cool.
Just to add here, the Thousand Sons show up, and it's important to note that this story opens with them not helping people, but with digging for knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
We heard everyone's going to die. Let's go save the books.
Exactly, yeah.
It's going to matter here in a second, but yes. So we have a great story of the Thousand Sons and the Iron Warriors, which were not obviously they're both traitors. You would not think of them as heroes, but I love this story for that exact reason.
Right. They were what they were before they became traitors, and we don't see that very much. Absolutely. To your point, and it's so cool. So one of my favorite characters in the Heresy and 40K, we're introduced to him, and it's Azek Araman. He's here with Magnus, of course, and he's joined by an Iron Warrior named Forax and other.
I love Forax in this story.
It's so great, and the way that it's written and the way that Keeble reads it, you just get this great juxtaposition of these two men. Yep. Araman is super calm, and he tries to always have a level conversation. And Forax is like, rah, 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 rah. He's like you would expect a dwarf to be like,
Yeah.
rah, rah, rah,
You sound
rah,
like
rah.
a nerd who reads too many
Always.
books.
but they make such a great pair, right? And the really cool thing is they're having just a conversation about stuff, and none of it is about war. They're just talking about all kind of like, what do you guys do in the Iron Wars? What do you guys do? You crazy Psyker guys. What is this I've heard about you guys being able to do these things? Because a lot of Marines still aren't really aware what the Thousand Sons are capable of.
Yeah, there's just weird stories.
Right, and Forax hasn't seen any of this stuff going on. But it was really cool to have this non-martial conversation going on between them.
Yeah.
And so what they did discover, though, they were both from Terra, so they shared that. They both have an interest in the home world of each other's legion. So, the Araman is like, well, what is your home world like, with mountains and everything else? And Forax is like, well, your home world, I hear there's pyramids and there's amazing things. And it's just so great just such a relaxing, cool change from what we usually get in the Heresy when Marines are talking.
I'd love it if we got more stories where they just chatted with each other. I mean, I think back to like the start of the Heresy when they introduced the Emperor's Children guy who helped get them out of the planet during Estevan 3. I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, yeah, I can't.
They talked about having like bonds between the Death Guard and the Emperor's Children. And these two loyalist guys from those sides were like friends. I'm like, this is how friendships look for Space Marines. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway,
because you don't think of them as human. You're right. You don't think of that.
Or just asking questions and being curious. Like, that's not a Space Marine trait.
No. Unless you're a Thousand Son.
Yeah, well, yeah, fair enough. You got me there.
But yeah, you're right. So as they continue to talk, Araman, of course, because of who he is, he can kind of read the auras of the people around him. And he's kind of feeling something is not quite right. So he sees this man climb to the top of a statue that's there. And before he could stop this guy, because his aura was like red, it was just super something wrong with it. The guy shot himself in the head. And, he gave this big speech and stuff. He killed himself. But doing that, it ended up being a signal for other people in the crowd who had weapons and swords, and guns and stuff. Mm-hmm. They just started laying into all these unarmed civilians.
Yep.
And one of the things I wrote in the notes here is we need to discuss the fact that there's a cult on this planet that worships a storm god, and the storm god's name is Shitan.
Yes.
And that name is really important, and this cult is very important. And they're kind of a doomsday cult. Basically, they're saying that everybody on the planet needs to die.
Yeah, so as the planet is falling apart, a doomsday cult erupted and was like, no, this is prophesied. We're going to be burned away and then reborn like phoenixes. So this is all part of the plan. I mean, that's their religious view, but like it ends up being, this is a scene to kind of put more context to it. It's a terrorist attack when the refugees are trying to board a ship to leave. This one cult is like, no, everybody needs to stay. And they try to kill everybody before anybody can leave. So it's like, and there's these reports of this cult come in very piecemeal. I thought they did really good for being such a short story of just kind of sprinkling in through dialogue of like, something weird's going on over there. Yeah, we had something weird going on over here too, where people are just spouting nonsense and blowing each other up.
And you're right. It builds so that you understand what the scope of this really is. And in fact, before we get into what happened with the crowd that Araman and Forax are a part of, there's a small village outside the capital, and they're Iron Warriors and Thousand Sons trying to evacuate. I guess there's about 500 people in this little village. Mm-hmm. And the two guys that we're going to talk about are Hathor Mart and Obax are the two Space Marines. So the elder of the village, he's like fanatical. He's like, we're just waiting for that volcano over there to erupt. We're not going to evacuate. Their deaths, they're saying, you know, are the will of the Storm Guard. And the two of them are just getting so frustrated. And finally, Obak says, so what do we do? And Hader Amat is like, let them die.
Yeah.
Just hell with them.
Yeah.
Because they were just so crazy.
Just do a vibe check.
Yeah.
If everybody wants to die, do we really want to kidnap you and have you seed a new colony? Not really.
Board the Stormbird. Yeah.
Yes.
Get the hell out of here. So back to the crowd. You know, there's gunfire. There's cutting weapons. Just killing swaths of civilians in front of Forax and Araman. And so, of course, the Astartes are there. They start slaughtering the killers. And again, we get another really great fight scene. The details have to be read to or listened to be appreciated. But you know, Araman is using his powers. He's just lighting people on fire, right? And he is protecting Forax with his kind shield, which is so cool. The whole kind shield thing, even when we did the Thousand Suns stuff, it just is amazing.
If they stopped there and that was the only power they ever used, it would still make them the most powerful legion.
It would, right? Yeah, and I wish they had transferred it to the tabletop somehow.
Yeah.
It would have been really cool if they could have done that, very narrative and thematic. But anyway. So one of the attackers like fired a rocket at Forax, and he just looked at the guy, and it's just like he deflected the rocket. He literally melted the guy. He looked like the guy at the end of the first Indiana Jones movie, at the end of it, when he just melted. Yes. You can just picture that happening to this guy. And Araman is just like, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then when it's all over, Forax looks over at Araman. He's like, how did you do all that?
Yeah, they're talking about like, hey, people say you guys are weird. And then he just watches Araman like snap a guy's spine from across the room, make somebody else shoot themselves in the head. He explodes a man's heart. It's like, that's cool.
Wow.
I will say, this book is full of, like, if you're a Thousand Suns player, this is jam-packed with the coolest kill scenes that this Legion can do that nobody else can do. And it's rad.
It is so cool. Yep. And so now we go to Perturabo's command fortress. It's huge, of course. I mean, it's a fortress. You know, it's Perturabo. And both the Primarchs and their command staffs are kind of looking at the progress of the evacuation, how to proceed. Of course, Perturabo is the master logistician.
Yes.
You know, he's coordinating every single ship, you know, micromanaging it, but doing it effortlessly. And one of the interesting parts I thought of the conversation early on was that they were talking, Magnus and Perturabo, about the use of psychic powers and how it's a risky thing. You know, and I think this is where you kind of start feeling their friendship a little more, because Perturabo isn't saying it like a warning. He's saying it like as a friend.
Yeah.
You need to be careful when you're using these things, because there are a lot of people who won't understand. He goes, I'm cool with it, but there are a lot of people who won't be.
Yep. And
you're putting yourself and your Legion at risk if you keep doing it.
Stop flaunting.
Yeah, you know, his other Primarchs, all the people on Terra. And it was interesting that, you know, Magnus like dropped Sanguinius as a name. Yeah, it's like, well, Sanguinius thinks it's cool.
Yeah, he's got wings. Brother. What's he going to say?
Yeah, right, exactly. He's all right with it. But of course, Perturabo being who he is, he's like, nah, it's still a problem. And then I thought, again, this is part of the tragedy of this story of the heresy, is that Perturabo in this story is one of the people who argues the strongest for saving every possible life.
Yes.
And you're going, wow, that's the Lord of Iron? Wow, that's really cool. It was so wonderful to see that side of him. I thought it was great. So anyway, with that, there's a brief discussion. Magnus wants to commit a single squad of his sons to go back to those ruins they were in and look for stuff. just last chance
Yep.
before they have to all evacuate. And it might tell them, what's going on. Why did Morningstar survive Old Night?
Mm-hmm.
And if we recall Old Night, this is when mankind kind of fell apart. And as we're going to learn later, a lot of this had to do with the unbridled discovery of Psykers.
Yes.
And so there's that piece of it, and we're going to find out more how that's related to it.
And I will say, this is a fantastic conversation they had around Perturabo's, like, I don't know, on his command deck, I guess. But it's just this discussion about, like, given the planet's backstory, yeah, so they survived perfectly, just like one of the 500 worlds, just fine. And everything else fell apart. And so now that the planet is dying, everyone's in a race to figure out how they did it. And so
yes,
that's essentially the idea we get.
Yeah, exactly. And then another wonderful scene. It's just so great. I say in my notes, it's sadly wonderful.
Yeah.
The conversation they have, because they move on to Perturabo's workshop. And they're just enjoying each other's company. It's just so great. Like, Magnus is seeing all these things his brothers created, all these architectural marvels, and all these little mechanisms and tools. And he shows him an instrument, shows Magnus an instrument that looks like a sextant, an old navigational instrument. And he's, there. It was interesting because he has built this thing for Magnus, and he goes, "Well, what does it do?" It's like, oh yeah, it would be nice to know that. And they talk about the Great Ocean. Well, the warp, the Great Ocean. Mm-hmm. I thought that was such a cool thing, having been somebody who learned how and actually used a sextant, at sea.
Yeah,
that was a really fun little piece for me, because it's like, oh yeah, okay, so that's what it's for. It's for him to help him navigate the Great Ocean when he goes into it. And it's like, wow, that's so cool and so thoughtful, because most of his brothers would have never done that for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the part where you're going, this is such a great story. And all of a sudden, Perturabo takes it back, takes a hammer, and he just smashes the thing.
Annihilates it.
Right? And he goes, no. He goes, I'm not going to be any part of you going in and looking into that Great Ocean when our father warned you not to do it.
Yep.
And he's like, whoa.
So there is a cruelty streak there of Perturabo.
Yeah.
By smashing it. But his object lesson is, we're here to rescue people. Like, he yes, you can take your little team of guys and go find out, but, like, this is the lesson of, that's not what we're here for, and you need to be reminded, in a nice way, without the Space Wolves, that the mission is people. Or, yes. I should say the mission is following the Emperor's orders, but, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that scene, because it was just this moment of shock for Magnus. He doesn't get a lot of those.
No.
I think half of them are in this book.
He knows everything. So the next few scenes are kind of past and present stuff, kind of going back and forth. So we see this coastal town.
Inject one more thing?
Yes,
so
sir.
While they're having a discussion on the command bridge, it becomes clear that even with both fleets combined, they simply don't have enough room to take everybody. So, like, the planet of the population of the planet isn't going to get everywhere. So they're having to try to sift through cultists that are killing themselves with actual reasonable refugees to get them places. But even if they do, there's not enough. And so it's this strife of, like, how do we save as many as we can?
Yes.
So I just wanted to move that forward.
Yep. So the first scene we get is a coastal city, and it's literally being swallowed by a chasm. There's a huge earthquake, almost like breaks it up. It's kind of the thing everybody talks about with California is going to fall into the sea, that kind of thing. It's kind of like that. That's what I pictured.
Yeah. You're right.
That. And then Magnus is in the city of Atar. He's looking for the planetary governor. It's, of course, being ripped apart, everything else. And he sees the auras of thousands of people who are already dead. And it's it kind of reminds him of the ghosts of it's pre-staging or presaging whatever the ghost that he sees on Prospero to me.
Yep, just all the dead and the suffering.
Souls wandering in the remains of this city, So that was kind of creepy. And then Hator Mar and Athava, they've returned to the ruined city of Zakuran, and they're searching for stuff. And Magnus told them to look for a feathered arrowhead, and I'm like, feathered? What? Oh, okay. And Athava tells Eshkali, or that conservator, does it have any significance on the planet? And as they're looking deeper and deeper, he didn't really get an answer, but as they're going deeper and deeper into the ruins, they find the remains of a Terran spaceship, thousands of years old. They rip open the hatch, and they go in. So
this ship is easily like 20,000 years older, or older, if not.
Oh,
man, it's like a true relic. Like the Mechanicus would explode with enjoyment if they saw
it. Yes. Yeah. So, discovery of the spaceship. They go in. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we will find out soon enough.
Yes.
Scary stuff. So the next part is just so cool. Again, this is one of those things where you have to listen or read it to appreciate this next scene. So Magnus has found the near-dead governor of the planet, and he starts to use his psychic powers to kind of heal him. And all of a sudden, as he does that, a Baneblade and several other armored vehicles arrive in the cities. They have the markings of the Red Dragons, who are like the planetary defense force kind of group. So one of the crew asks Magnus if he's found the governor, and he says, "Yeah, I have." And all of a sudden, the vehicles start firing on Magnus. You're going, what?
He takes a shot to the chest.
And this is it's just this mad symphony of energy weapons and kind shields and solid shot. And Magnus is throwing force to rip stuff apart. But he was actually being hurt.
Yes.
Which is crazy. But you think about this. There's las cannons. It's a freaking Baneblade, man. Like, yeah. I know he is the Primarch. He's a Primarch. I get it. He's got these unbelievable psychic powers. Nonetheless, it was just scary to see like a las cannon shot hitting him, or a solid round from like the Baneblade or something.
I will take this. This is more believable for me than Angron getting stepped on by a Warlord Titan and not dying.
A great call, man. It is true. It is so true. Because even if he's being hurt, Magnus heals himself. He's healing himself.
Yeah, I mean, he's got like a 4-up no pain in this game. That's
absolutely. Absolutely. And he, of course, can multitask. So while he's healing himself, he reaches into the minds of like the crew of the Baneblade, and he manipulates them to attack each other or to shoot at each other. Different tanks shooting at each other. He's just lighting them on fire. And he's also, while he's doing that, though, he's trying to see why they've gone crazy.
Yep.
But what he realizes is they're not mad. They're martyrs.
Yes.
And they want to die for this unfulfilled destiny, which we've referred to already, but we're going to find out more stuff. But they're just part of this cult now. All of a sudden, part of the PDF is. This reminds me of like a Gene Stealer cult thing,
Yeah, I was getting those same vibes.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me. Okay, so just an epic scene with Magnus fighting tanks and stuff. So back in the capital, this one individual, I kind of think she seems like a tech priest kind of a person. Her name's Vashti. And she's the commander of the Orbital Command Center that's overlooking all the ships coming and going and stuff. And one thing she's focused on is there's this monstrous transport ship named the Lux Faram. And there are dozens and dozens of tug haulers that have kind of, sent out these force beams, and they're lifting this massive ship into orbit. And the thing here is that this is not a suborbital ship. This was never meant to come to the surface of a planet and have to lift itself off again. And it probably could, but it's also just totally overloaded everything. The cargo, the holds are just packed with people. But the thing is, it's still rising very slowly, very steadily, but it's leaving the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Vashti and her crew are like, yes, this is awesome. And what you do is then we flash back to Magnus, who's headed back to the planet, or back to the capital, as he continues to heal from those wounds he had, which are just massive.
Yep.
And he looks outside the Stormbird, and he sees a flight of thunderbolts flying at speed towards the capital as well. And
those are the Space Marine fighters, for those of you who don't know what the Thunderbolt is.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right. You're thinking, whatever. You're kind of like, but wait a minute. There must be a reason he mentions these, right? So Araman and Forax both have this suspicion there's more treachery that's going on. But it's not overt. Like, they're not out there, but they're there. They're not like screaming and yelling anymore. So Forax is like, well, you could use your powers. And Araman's a little hesitant to do that because of the mass of people. I mean, there's just thousands and thousands of people. He's going, well, I guess I could do that.
Yeah. Well, and Forax doesn't know, like, okay, well, when a Psyker looks in your brain, it's like ripping it open with like a raccoon going through a dumpster.
Exactly, right?
It's not a smooth thing.
And Araman's a little confused because he's like, well, if I look for individual people, it's going to take me all day. And Forax says, no. We need to look for multiple people that have this issue that are traitors.
Yep.
Because when they think about what happened, that could not have been one person who planned all that.
Yep.
So he says, Araman tells Forax to watch out for him, because what he's going to essentially do is discorporate and kind of go on a flight and look and see what he can see as he's discorporating. So at the same time, Vashti and her crew become aware there's a flight of fighters, those Thunderbolts that we just talked about, that are coming straight at the Lux Faram, this huge ship.
Yep.
So she tries to warn them off. They keep coming. And then all of a sudden, one of her crew stands up and shows that she's got this huge Faisaline bomb. And she screams, "Hail Shitan!" And boom, the orbital command center just goes kablooey.
Yes.
And Vashti and all these people. And of course, this is going to affect what happens with the Lux Faram. So we're back to Araman and Forax again. So while he's flying around, this column of combat vehicles, wonder what's going to happen with this. It approaches the evacuation route, and Forax right away, he's like, there's something not right here. There's no way that a bunch of military vehicles are going to come into this area.
Yeah.
And of
you
course,
were not summoned here.
being a Marine, being an Astartes and especially an Iron Warrior, he knows that something is not right. So he basically goes, this is going to be trouble. He throws Araman over his shoulder and he starts walking. You're going, what? Yeah, that's what he did. Because Araman's just kind of a limp rag, right? He's out. He's somewhere flying around.
Yep.
And Forax walks towards these vehicles and he looks at the crew as as he's getting closer, and all of a sudden he realizes what's going on. I thought this was so cool. So over his Vox, he goes, "Enemy in the wire. Treat all planetary defense forces as evil." When he said "enemy in the wire," it's like, oh, that's just such an Iron Warriors thing to say.
Oh,
so
I
cool.
like that.
That was great. And then this really amazing battle again. We don't have all the details. You need to listen to read it to appreciate it. But Forax is trying to defend himself at Araman. There's a pair of Hydras and a pair of tanks that are firing. I mean, you're going, oh my gosh. Like, he doesn't have the Magnus stuff going on.
No, he doesn't have the it shall no it will not die rules and
and of course Magnus can't help him because he's incorporeal. But he's seen the Thunderbolts as he's flying around. So now he uses his psychic powers to basically reach into the minds of these pilots and just whoosh, he just squishes their brains.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter because too many of the lifter tugs have been destroyed. And so this Lux Faram ship starts to fall now. This is
Yeah.
millions and millions of metric tons of ship that are going to fall. It's like the ultimate kinetic weapon. If this thing hits the surface,
Yep.
cities die.
If the cultists were trying to kill people, it's a pretty darn good way to do it.
It's perfect. Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about as I was reading this, it's like, imagine if America needed every ship that it had to mass evacuate the country, and a bunch of people were like, we should raise the Arizona from Pearl Harbor. She can take a few more. And that's exactly what this thing is. It was a decommissioned transporter or a hauler that they recommissioned into being a support vessel example. Where you're just like, this thing already shouldn't have been moving, and then you went and shot it in the sky.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect. So now we get back to the surface. Araman's doing his thing flying around. And Forax, of course, has been very severely injured. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's hydras pumping these mass number of shells into him, but he keeps going, man. He's an Iron Warrior.
He's a trooper. He made a promise.
Yeah. And it's really funny. And again, this is one of these tragic moments for me, that he starts speaking of faith and honor. Faith and honor. I have to get to this. I have to do this. I have to protect my brother. Faith and honor. You're going, oh, gosh. How far the mighty have fallen. It's so sad.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. But there's only so much he could do, honestly.
Yes, of course.
And he's basically dying, is what's happening. Araman returns to his body. He finds his friend's body burned and battered. And all he could really do at this point was kind of ease his pain, you know. And he looks from where they are, and he sees. So that happens, and then Perturabo sees that the Lux Faram is going to crash into the city, and you're going, "Oh my gosh, man!" So he recalls all of his warriors back to the fortress. He wants the void shields activated. And he also notices a flaming stormbird that's approaching the Lux Faram with his brother on board.
Yeah, this is when you need to start playing the Leonard Skinner Freebird like solo music if you're a Thousand Suns player, like the guitar riff. This is it.
Sure. So Magnus and his sons on the Stormbird, they basically crash underneath of this massive transport ship. They're like a football field below this thing, 100 meters below it, according to the book. And Magnus, he's been shot and torn up and stuff. Even if he's healing himself, man, he's got to be exhausted. So he's taken all of his psychic strength and all of his sons. He's like channeling at all of them. And he basically, I mean, no description could do justice to this.
Yes.
That when you think of the unbelievable power of that ship falling, that kinetic energy, just millions and millions of newtons of force, and yet it's Magnus and it's his 1,000 sons. And this ship doesn't fall; it gently settles to the ground.
It falls with style.
Yeah, 24 of his sons are dead.
Yep. Because
they basically burn out. There was just so this was fun in a way. So basically, they were just piles of ash.
Yes. And
we get to our first real, even though it's indirect reference that all is dust. That whole thing that's just the classic 1,000 Suns deal. But Magnus has survived. Armand survived. So then Magnus kind of goes on a spirit journey. He's a little overloaded, and it's kind of a reminiscence to when the Emperor first came to Prospero, and it was just an interesting scene, I thought. Was there anything in there in particular that you thought about, or?
When Magnus
kind of reminisced about the Emperor coming to Prospero and what that was like, and how enlightened he was, and how wonderful it was to have his father there. And
yeah, it was a wholesome moment because we don't. They definitely have a connection that no one else does. The Emperor and Magnus, and they both seem very unaware of how strong the other is. I think. I mean, that's just my assumption. I'm sure the Emperor knows exactly how strong Magnus is, but he seems surprised that Magnus does the things he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was. You're right. It was a wholesome moment. It was fun to see the two of them. It was really cool. So Magnus actually kind of wakes up. He's been in a coma, and it's been like for a day and a half, and he's back in Perturabo's what do you call it, fortress.
Yep.
And the two of them are talking about the evacuation timeline now, in that it's really been reduced by a lot based on what's happening. And as Magnus looks at this really amazing holographic display, which's got all the planetary storms, how they're moving, how they're kind of interacting with each other, he has this very disturbing revelation. And he's saying that these storm patterns are man-made. And you're going, oh man, like who or what is behind this, right?
Yeah.
So Magnus is going to take Phocis Takar, who we've heard about Phocis Takar in the Thousand Suns book. He's very prominent. And he takes him and Araman in two squads of Thousand Suns, and they go back to Zakuran. They go back to the ruins, which is really interesting because it's like an eye of the storm. It's very quiet. It's very serene. There's no storm activity. It's just like nothing's going on.
And at this point, essentially the mission when he wakes back up is, okay, the timetable's changed. We don't even know if we want to save all these people, but we could at least figure out why this is happening, right? I mean, Magnus has a mission to figure out how they survived Old Night, and Perturabo is like, what weapon could possibly make a planet barf up its own magnetosphere? And so they're on two missions here, and we'll follow Magnus's. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so they find the Stormbird that Hato Mart and Athava had come in. Ramps open, engines cold. They do find a survivor, though, and it's the conservator Ashkali.
Yeah.
And she's almost dead because she poisoned herself by eating Astartes combat rations, which are not designed for people.
No, dude, they got their own Cliff Bars. It's like just pure raw chemicals to keep their system going.
And she said they went down into the ship, and he's like, "What, a ship?" And so they get her stabilized, and then they find this opening, this hatch. They go into the ship itself, and the more and more they go into the ship and what's below the surface, the more anxious they're all getting. Like, they feel pain, they feel torture, and just this horrible, oppressive feeling that they're getting the further and further they go in. And all of a sudden they're going, and 6 figures appear, and he recognizes them as Thousand Suns, including Hato Mart and Athava. But they're changed. Something's not right within there. They kind of have this ghostly, sickly glow at them. And Araman yells at Magnus that they have to leave, like, right now. And one of the guys goes, "It's too late to leave. No one leaves Shitan." And you're going, oh, there it is again. Shitan. Oh, crap. It's like, oh, gosh. So while that's happening, Perturabo and his men are flying into the heart of a storm because they're trying to break through to get to this place they think they can find what's going on with creating the storms themselves. And so they're trying to find the source of this apocalypse. They fly into a black wall. There's all this. It's a great scene again where Perturabo's trying to control this Stormbird. Nobody else except for him could do it. And they shoot out the other side of this wall of turbulence, and they see this was so cool. I just love this. There's like literally a tectonic plate of the planet, and it's being pushed into another tectonic plate by this massive like metal construct. It's like a world killing machine. Is what this thing is. And it's tearing up the tectonic plates all over the planet. So right away, I mean, being Perturabo, he's like, okay, we're not going to mess around, man. We're just going to get rid of this thing. And this orbital barrage comes down. It's just relentless. It's thorough. It's merciless, just blowing the heck out of this machine. And, you know, as he went away from all this, he like felt nothing. He was like numb because he knew that the planet was doomed. He knew that these sons of Shitan would keep throwing themselves in suicidal waves against everyone. That they would try to destroy everything that's not already just destroyed. They'd try to kill it. And he was just resigned at that point. There was which was so weird, knowing Perturabo and his personality. He just, I guess, given up. He's resigned himself. He's just going to save his. And this is again cool and very compassionate that his goal now is to save as many people as possible. Yeah, and then leave the planet and never look back. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, and his realization of that I thought was really interesting because he looks at this, sees the machine, and it becomes clear, like, okay, these are not cult attacks. This has taken generations. This planet has been trying to kill itself forever. I mean, like, what? Like, he was saying, like, the world-killing engine or whatever it is something that, like, even the tech priest would be impressed by, but they don't build this. Like, nobody builds a machine to kill planets. Right. So this is all original. And so it's just kind of, he becoming sad because the people he sent to save are like deeply invested in their own destruction, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. We also find that as he's headed back to the capital, he's getting these Vox reports that the Sons of Shitan have broken into the Iron Warriors fortress. And you're going, what? Like, nobody breaks into anything that belongs to the Iron Warriors if they don't want them to.
Right.
And what had happened was that these cultists had used, basically they'd hacked into the Thousand Suns and the planetary network and had deactivated the defenses of the fortress. But they also, one of the things that I thought was so disturbing was they set off all the minefields around and just killed thousands of people who were standing in these deactivated minefields around the fortress.
Yep.
And just didn't care.
Turned on all the offenses, yeah.
At this point, Perturabo was just, okay, this is crap. And he's just like, I'm going to make these fanatics pay. Whatever I have to do, they're all freaking dead. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So here we go. Magnus. Yes. We're back to Magnus again. And these guys are in trouble. Magnus and his guys are in trouble because Shitan, who is Athava, unleashes this wall of psychic force. And it's so strong, it throws Magnus against a wall.
Yep.
And you're going, oh, they are well and truly done. Like, so his Astartes are being like immolated, crushed, ripped apart. And the battle, once again, crazy. You have the Thousand Suns who are trying to focus and fight these incredibly powerful psychic beings. Shitan's power actually pins Magnus into this machine. And this machine, it turns out, is designed to remove the Psyker from a Psyker.
Yep, it's like a lobotomizer.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And they're putting him in this particular machine. So let me see. I just want to look at my notes.
Would I be jumping the gun if I explained why?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So essentially what we learn through bits and pieces is that this fleet ship is evidence of how Morning Star survived Old Night. And the way that
Yes.
they did it was the brutal lobotomization of anyone who was a psyker. They took you in, put this thing on your head, drilled your brain out, and then silenced you.
Yeah.
And what Magnus is dealing with, Shitan, who is now in the body of Alfava, he is like kind of this gestalt spirit of all of the pain and suffering that was caused by this happening. And so it's sort of like they're being attacked by a ghost of Morningstar's past.
Yes.
And that this ghost, this presence, had been seeking retribution this entire time since Old Night.
Yes.
So we learn that is where all the influence for the world engine being built and this stuff happening is that he's been trying to kill everything forever. Yeah. I mean, this is the penultimate. This is the ending stages of his plan, so he loves it.
And what you talked about with the lobotomized psychers, there are like hundreds, if not thousands, of bodies in these like little tubes all over the place, and these are all people who have had that, that life force sucked out of them by these machines. And again, the purpose of this was, as we know with Long Night, or when that happened, it was because of the psychic potential being tapped of just billions of human beings, and it just drove everybody mad. And so when these people came here, they were like, well, if we can get rid of all the psychic stuff, then we could have a normal planet. We won't have to deal with what everybody else is dealing with. And it worked, kind of. So that's why they survived.
Yep. And so now he wants to, Shitan now wants to inflict that same punishment on others, specifically the most psychically gifted Primarch
in the universe. So we go back to Vashti, who survived, actually, that suicide attack on the Orbital Command Center. Mm-hmm. She's trying to coordinate all these flights again, but she, just like Perturabo, knows it's not going to be enough. You had said, it's not going to be enough no matter what we do. It's kind of interesting because she's a little bit bitter that Perturabo, who's an outsider, has kind of made this choice, of who, deciding the fate of thousands of people. Yep. She kind of feels like it's a form of tyranny that he's doing this. But she also notices that there are several ships that have been descending to pick up more civilians, and they're all returning to orbit. And she's going, what? What's going on?
Yeah, get back to the planet.
She was told that the planetary governor had overridden the codes for the orbital control and ordered all the ships to cease evacuation. And this is where the governor who Magnus had saved it turns out he's one of the cultists. Yep. And he's the one who enabled the hacking of the defense protocols and all the kind of stuff that's going on. So that's all going on in the capital. So the Battle of the Starship is very intense now. Just this battle royale. It's horrific. It's powerful. Araman and his brothers. This really disturbs Araman because he's realizing that he's fighting and killing they're his brothers. Yep. They're former space marines. He's actually killing 1,000 sons. And this is it's beyond the pale for him. He can't imagine having ever had to kill other space marines. This, of course, is a, preamble for the heresy, but he's seeing it now, living it out. And as they fought, Araman gets a call. He gets a call from Magnus, who reaches out to him and says, "Hey, look, and Araman looks over and sees that this machine is literally like getting ready to drill into Magnus and inject these chemicals into him and again wipe him out as a psyker." And so it's really cool. Araman orders a spear formation, and you can kind of picture how that must look with all these psychers and their hands out and going. So he wants to free the Primarch. What happens is Hatomar, who we talked about before, he's one of the 6 also, and he has Pavoni powers. So he can animate hundreds of these corpses that are in these glass tubes. So now not only are they fighting these 6 incredibly powerful psychic beings, they're also fighting like hundreds and hundreds of corpses, zombies essentially that have been reanimated. Magnus is lying on this table. He's understanding what's happening now. He understands what has happened here in this place and the reason for everything that's going on. Again, he feels these chemicals being injected and poisoning his bloodstream, and he was hoping his sons were going to come for him. So Araman charges Shitan. He's thrown back by a wave of energy, but that means that Shitan's been distracted.
Yep.
And now Magnus has just the split second he needs. He like twists Shitan Athava's wrist, pins him to the slab, and this is just great. This quote, that's why I put it in quotes, man. He just screams at this guy, "I'm Magnus, master of Prospero, and I was taught by the Emperor of Man, the greatest Psyker in the galaxy. Against that, you have nothing." And this demon, like you said, this Gisalt, mind just can't handle it anymore, and it just rises out of Athava. Then it's killed him at this point, but they just see this huge red cloud, and it's so cool. Magnus grabs this grimoire he has on his belt, chained to his belt, and in it he's kept like history, and he's kept history of people and things like that. So he points this thing out, and he says that, to this Gisalt, all these people that are in this being, I can offer you lives you could never have dreamed of, and if you would just come to me, I can free you from all your torture and everything that's going on. So most of the people in this collective, this psychic collective, go into the book. They get sucked into it and absorbed into it. And then everything's quiet.
Yeah, he did the Ghostbusters ghost trap on him.
Oh, my gosh. And, but some of these battle scenes, again, you just have to read or listen to them to appreciate them. Just so frenetic and so detailed and descriptive, and just what you love about the Heresy and about Astartes. So now that's done, we're back on Perturabo's flagship. And Magnus tells Perturabo there's no other way to ensure that this madness of Shitan doesn't get to other worlds. They're going to have to do what the Inquisition does on a regular basis in 40K. And so the first thing that Perturabo orders is all the evacuation vessels that are still in space, they just blow them all out of the sky.
Yep.
Everything from space down to the surface, every ship is destroyed. And then all of a sudden, Exterminatus happens to the world of Morningstar, and then Magnus, of course, says, "All is dust."
Yes. Which is an ending I was not seeing, but I love it.
Yeah.
Got to make the hard call.
And so we're back to the planet of the sorcerers to finish up the book. Magnus and Athava, Shitan, are looking at the hatch, because what's happened is Magnus actually went back to excavate the spaceship, and he kind of brought it back with him for the planet of the sorcerers, and he and Shitan are looking at it, and as the conversation kind of twists and turns, there's a mention of his favorite son, and Magnus's favorite son, who is Araman, performing a ritual to save his legion. And as Magnus walks away from Athava Shitan, his last words again are, "All is dust, Magnus. All is dust."
Yes, lots of preludes there.
Oh,
so that is an incredible story. Absolutely loved it. One thing I want to go back, because there was one bit that I didn't mention at the time, but I loved.
Okay, sure.
Araman is trying to save Forax when he was doing his spirit journey, and Forax was keeping him safe. gets back to his body. Araman goes to heal him, and he sees a vision of the future of Forax as a Chaos Lord of like Chaos Space Marine Chaos Lord. I mean, just wreathed in black and armor, and he's fire and stuff. And he didn't know what to make of it at the time. He was like, "That was a weird little vision. Maybe I'm getting messed up in the head because of this planet." But what he means is he saved him, and now he's going to go change fate. And he just allowed this Iron Warrior to exist that he's now going to evolve into something else. I was like, oh, man.
Oh, gosh.
So what do you think? I adored this book because every
Absolutely.
scene contributed to the main plot. I was constantly interested in the evolution of this cult, from flailing attacks that didn't have a whole lot of purpose to a centuries-long world engine killer.
Yeah,
I don't know. It was really, really cool. What did you think? Sorry.
I thought it was great how they built up to, at the end, explaining the purpose of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when they found the machines and they found the reason for the cult being formed and all those things, and they found the world machine that was destroying the planet, and it like you said, it was really cool because it built you up, it moved you through the story, but you still didn't know what was going to happen, and that was what was really cool. There were still some surprises. A lot of times in a Horus Heresy book, you're like, "Oh, I know what's going to happen next. I know." No, in this book, you just didn't know. It just kept getting worse and worse.
Exactly. And there's 2 legions there, and everyone else in every other book is like, "What's that? The Ultramarines and the Word Bearers are going to get together to fight orcs? Those orcs don't stand a chance." So you have 2 legions that are just on a rescue mission.
Yes.
And you're just like, there is so much gunpowder in all of this. It's so fun. One of the things that when I finished the book, I listened to it audio-wise, but when I finished it, it occurred to me that the author did a really fun trick where Magnus is empathetic to the plight of Shitan and all the Psykers who were tortured and sacrificed. Sure. And you're like, yes, this is a good guy. We like Magnus. And at the end of the book, I was like, how much suffering would have not happened if he had actually silenced Magnus in that moment? Meaning, the people of Morningstar who initiated all of this hatred had a point. Which is to say that sometimes getting rid of the Psyker is probably a good idea, and now we have a demon prince Magnus, and you think to yourself, boy, I wish someone could have turned that switch off.
Sure.
For 10th. I don't know. It put me in a weird spot where I was like, yeah, but they were right. But they were evil. And Magnus is the undisputed hero of this story, but they had a point. And, with all the themes the Thousand Sons have of like, we can, but should we? I thought that was a really cool thing. It kind of made me flip to the other side for a split second.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because I have these 2 or 3 legions that I always, as I mentioned earlier, the Emperor's an idiot moments.
Yep.
And Thousand Sons is one, Word Bearers is another.
Yeah.
And you just, again, on the other side of your thoughts on that things should Magnus have just had that stuff removed from his head. If the Emperor had been not an idiot, then again, the Thousand Sons would have been such an amazing asset. They would have been incredible in terms of what they could have done and their potential and everything else. And, you wonder, the other thing, this book, the way it created this amazing relationship between Perturabo and Magnus, it made me wonder if Magnus had stayed loyal, would Perturabo maybe have stayed loyal too? Because they were so close, and I wonder if, because Perturabo was having a hard time. He obviously he went traitor, but
but he wasn't angry like the other ones were in the same.
If he had a brother like Magnus come to him, somebody he was close to, and say to him, no, this is wrong, you kind of wonder if that wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah, I can see that.
All kinds of fun speculation. But
I don't know. We got to listen to Perturabo's story at some point because I want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
absolutely,
I think it was just a really, the Space Wolves one I thought was interesting because it's the Space Wolves getting their teeth kicked in a lot, which is odd if you're a Space Wolf fan buying their book. And this is one where it's like, if you're a Thousand Suns player, this is an unmitigated roller coaster of awesomeness from the first chapter to the last, and I enjoyed it. Doesn't make me want to paint them, but by golly, they are cool.
Yes, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Any last thoughts here before we?
No, a great read.
Awesome.
Great.
So our next one, we have another Primarch book, because during the winter season, it's really nice to have these shorter stories. They're very digestible. We're going to do Alfarius, Head of the Hydra by Mike Brooks. Yeah, you recommended that one to me, and so I'm just along for the ride. I'm very excited. Alfarius is one of my favorite characters, but I'm also someone who really loved Legion, and that's like not the most popular Horus Heresy book.
Yes.
But I just think it's awesome. I think they did a great job of detailing what shadowy army looks like.
And I think one of the reasons I recommended this book is that it'll help you get a little better understanding of Alfarius, which we don't have, which is, it's perfect for him. We don't know what he is or who he is or anything, but it really helps you enjoy him more as a character because you find out more about him. Sweet. And what he's really like. And so that's very cool.
Sweet. Awesome. So that is going to be our next book if you guys wanted to read along. I'm excited to get into that. If anyone is curious, at Adepticon 2025, I plan on doing quite a bit of Horus Heresy. I was just talking to Dan before we started the show about our Adepticon plans. We're still doing the fundraiser for kids and the Age of Sigmar Spearhead event that we're doing on Sunday. But Thursday through Saturday, I'm going to be doing me some Heresy this year with my Sons of Horus. So I'm very excited.
So great, man.
Yeah. So I'll do a bonus episode and just kind of report on that or something.
Excellent.
But
Excellent.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And
always, buddy. Thank you for having me along for the ride as well. So
absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And until next time, may the Emperor protect.